So, Vince, pass game time.
Yes, sir.
Here we go. This is going to be an interesting matchup because
it is.
It's Notre Dame's been kind of like two different offenses this year when it comes to the pass game. And I'm curious to see which one shows up again. And I'm hoping that what we saw against USC is just the beginning, because for as happy and excited as I was about the progress they made, it's still not where it needs to be. And what I mean by that is, yes, they were really good, efficient, and moving the ball. Number one, they left too many points on the field. And number two, they weren't able to really hit any big plays in the pass game. And they're going to need that against North Carolina. They're going to need that the rest of the year, especially against North Carolina. And so, to me, when I look at that part of the matchup, I look at this and say, if we can get a combination of what we saw the first two games with what from a scheme and effectiveness and aggressiveness standpoint, and if we can combine that with what we saw from the last couple games from a pass protection standpoint, and then what we saw late against Virginia Tech and against USC from a get it out quick, spread the field, we've seen everything they need to do in regards to having a really explosive pass game. I think they went away from that partly because of protection, and then that protection led to Jack Cohn not playing very well. But I think Saturday we started to see that, and they took some shots downfield. It wasn't that they didn't try to take shots downfield; they just didn't connect. You had Jack underthrew. I thought underthrew Lorenzo Styles on a play that should have been lead him. He missed Michael Mayer, and then Kevin Austin had two missed plays. So it's not like they didn't take shots, but we need to see that connect more. And I think against a North Carolina team that likes to mix up their coverages a lot, North Carolina in their base defense, Vince, is they list themselves as kind of like a 3-3, kind of how they have a D end, a D tackle, a nose tackle, then two outside linebackers and an inside linebacker. But if you really look at it and you really break it down, it's not really a 3-3. It's more of a 4-2-5. One of their outside linebackers is more of he's more of a defensive end. Right. If you really break it down, that's Tamon Fox. He's a 6'3", 265-pound kid. That means he's the same size as Dalen Hayes. And if you watch how he plays, that's how he lines up. So I say they, like, when I think 3-3-5, I think what we see when Notre Dame does it, which is you got a nose, you got 2-5 techniques, but what North Carolina normally does is they have more of their D tackles in on a 3 technique or some kind of 2-eye or maybe a 4-eye, which is outside the tackle, but then their outside linebacker is lined up outside in a 2-point stance. 2-point stance meaning he doesn't have his hand in the ground. It's exactly how Notre Dame uses their Viper, their drop end. So it's more of a 4-down front than anything. They will mix up their looks. They'll bring they'll slant, they'll twist, they'll stump, they'll bring linebackers from depth. That's my big concern in this game, Vince.
Yeah, because I don't feel like USC really did that.
No,
they didn't do that, and it allowed Notre Dame to be successful with their offensive line. Right? I mean, they weren't dealing with games a whole lot, line games and stunts and things. And this is going to be a big test for them. I agree with you. As I was watching the film, what stood out to me greatly is how much they do move and stunt and play games up front. And a lot of times that will, teams do that to mask inability to get things done defensively. But North Carolina has some guys. I mean, it's not. I don't think they're doing it to mask their deficiencies.
Their talent level isn't as bad as their numbers.
Right. Exactly. I don't think that their scheme is to mask their deficiencies. I just think that that's who they are, and they're going to challenge Notre Dame. This is going to be a big test, especially on the left side, because those guys are new, they're young, they haven't really experienced that kind of a thing yet, because I have no anticipation that the right side is going to be able to handle it. I hate to be the negative guy, but that's just where I'm at. So
did Kane Madden leave a flaming pile of something on your front yard or something like that?
Did you rewatch the film?
I did.
By chance, and your thoughts on that?
He wasn't good.
I haven't talked to you about it.
He wasn't as awful as I think you. I think at times you've tended to kind of focus on how many mistakes he makes and kind of gloss over the good blocks he has. But the reality is he's a one-trick pony. If he can block down in the A gap, he's going to get great movement.
Yes.
But you also can't dismiss how effective those blocks were in the game. I think that's where we've missed it. But overall, it was a pretty. I mean, he was graded out as their least effective offensive lineman for me, and it was just the same old. But I'm just kind of giving you a hard time about that. You just
that's okay. Because look, I need to be called out.
I think Josh Lugg was better than you're giving him credit for in that game too.
Good.
He got beat a couple times, but I think he was better than I think you give him credit for. And I felt the same way in the Virginia Tech game. I thought that he was better than you thought he did. But your point stands, Vince, whether it's the right side or the left side. North Carolina is not going to do what USC did.
Right.
They're going to say, we can't just let Jack Cohn sit back there and get comfortable, because we saw what he did to Florida State. We saw what he did to Toledo when he had time. We saw what he did to Purdue when he had time. We saw what he did to Virginia Tech when he had time. And we saw what he did to USC when he had time. Look, people don't like Jack Cohn. I get that. Some don't. But when the kids had time this year, he shreds people. I mean, that's just the reality. And North Carolina is going to do that. Now, the problem is, when I watch Jay Bateman coach, he reminds me too much of a John Tenuta type of guy, in that what he does isn't super sound. And Notre Dame has to be able to take advantage of that. They turn so many guys loose in the pass game. And here's the keys for Notre Dame. Number one, you have to protect. You have to be prepared for twists, for line games, for stunts, for second-level pressures. They're going to bring a corner fire or two in this game. I still don't understand why USC didn't do that. Every team
corner fire has worked every time against Notre Dame.
Has had no answers for that this year. No. Now, maybe Notre Dame would have had an answer for it against USC, right? I'm not.
But they didn't even try.
Saying, at least try.
Yeah, I'm with you.
North Carolina is not going to sit back and just let them run free and hope that their secondary guys who are talented can cover. They're not dumb. So you have to protect. That's number one. Number two is, there's two concerns I have on the perimeter. Number one is, or two comments. One is, North Carolina is a very undisciplined secondary when there's any kind of movement or post-snap switch of routes. What that essentially is so let's say you have an outside receiver and an inside receiver. At the snap, the post-snap switches, the outside receiver does something inside and then does a route, and then the outside guy works outside. We've seen Notre Dame do that a little bit this year. They did it a couple of times against USC. Another one is when they team stack, and Florida State did this for a big play. Florida State motioned their outside guy down, ran a stack alignment, and he just released vertically, and two guys from North Carolina ran with one Florida State guy, and the other guy just ran free for a big play.
And Notre Dame has run that stack before, and they've also done a little bit about what you're talking about out of that three-man bunch. They've done some of that. You know what I mean? So that's in their wheelhouse. Like, they don't have to just draw stuff up in the dirt.
We saw Michael Mayer catch a post wheel on that against Purdue. You know, like you said, we've seen it.
Yeah.
We need to see some of that. Here's my concern, however. My concern is at times Notre Dame has got too horizontal stretch focused. Now, what that means is, a horizontal stretch, as we've talked about, is sort of left to right or right to left route. So this guy's doing something vertically, this guy's doing something vertically, this guy's doing something vertically, right? As opposed to a vertical stretch, which is, the stretch refers to the manner in which you're stretching the defense and the manner in which the quarterback reads it. A horizontal stretch is left to right, right to left. So inside guy to outside guy. A vertical stretch is more top to bottom, bottom to top. So essentially you have, two guys, one guy runs an in, another guy runs, an under. You have some kind of post-snap switch, smash concepts, floods. We've talked about floods on this, where the outside guy runs a go route. One of the inside guys runs like a 12 to 15 yard out. Another guy runs a shallow, where you're kind of stretching them top to bottom. That's a vertical stretch. When you run crosses over the middle and the guy behind it, that's a vertical stretch. You're stretching the defense vertically. Now, the ironic thing that some people have a hard time understanding is concept is not a vertical stretch in the manner in which we're talking. It's actually a horizontal stretch. Yeah. So again, it's about the read and the manner in which you're stretching the defense. The scary thing about this is that because Notre Dame does tend to get a little too, at times, vertically oriented, or horizontal or oriented with kind of the ISO routes, North Carolina has sort of the defense that has given that problems this year. They have a 6'2" and a 6'1" cornerback that are really athletic players. And that is Tony Grimes, who's a former 5-star recruit from Virginia, and Kyler McMichael, who's a 6'2", 200-pound corner from Georgia. We saw against Cincinnati, their big, long corners just ate the Notre Dame outside guys up on these type of routes. Purdue did the same thing. If they just kind of come out and say, hey, let's have Kevin Austin run go routes all game, he's either going to have the best game of his career or they're going to struggle. Because I don't think he's not going to all of a sudden be the most well-coached receiver in the world. Him and Braden Lindsey it's just not going to be the case. So if they're just coming out and running comebacks and go routes, these North Carolina corners are pretty good players. Now, does that mean you don't take those shots? Yeah, you do. Mm-hmm. And you still take them, but it can't be the focal point of what you do, which is what Notre Dame has had a tendency to do this season. You have to mix those up with, if you want to run a horizontal stretch, do it from a bunch. A wide bunch, do it with post-snap switches, do it with moving the pocket, get the quarterback out and do some different things that way, execute but then mix it in with the horizontal or the vertical stretches. So if you want to take a shot outside, take your shot outside, right? Have Braden Lindsey run a go route, but instead of running it with a 4 verts concept, which you should do at times, run it out of a flood concept. So you've got your go route, but then if they kind of jump that, you've got your outs and those type of things.
Right.
And the thing, and if they're going to run verts and run a horizontal stretch, I'd like to see them do that out of more trip stuff, where you get your number 3 receiver kind of working back across the field. Then you can kind of mix up your backside routes. You can maybe bank some out cuts, really put that safety in a bind. If you like some of those one-on-ones, maybe bunch yourself a little bit, put Kevin Austin in a bit of a reduced alignment, which, is like 4 yards outside the tackle, because when you go, so if you're out wide, they're going to press a lot. But when you kind of bring a reduced look, they'll back off because they're thinking you're going to go across the field.
Right.
So then that allows you to kind of work on some vertical stuff where you can kind of occupy the safety and the corner. And then you can bring a Michael May. So bring him down, run like a deep corner route where he's going to occupy the corner and the safety, and then bring Michael Mayer on a 15, 20-yard drag route, replacing those 2 guys. Just some stuff like that where you're getting your horizontal stretches, but you're doing it in concepts where you're stressing a part of what North Carolina does. So you're really attacking their safeties, because if the pass game becomes a corner versus receiver game, North Carolina can win against Notre Dame. If it becomes your safeties are going to have to cover, that's advantage Notre Dame. And so that's really where it comes down to. So we need to see some creativity from Coach Reese. Mm-hmm. The quick game is going to be important, but North Carolina is going to be aggressive in their coverage. They're going to try to force you down the field. They're going to have to do some things formationally to try to isolate Michael Mayer, to get him in some favorable matchups. To me, this is a big game for Avery Davis.
Yeah.
Like, this has Avery Davis.
And he's been kind of quiet the last couple games.
Well, because teams have been kind of playing him.
They should. I mean, right. Yeah, right.
And so this screams Avery Davis breakout over the last few games to me. And it screams, okay, this is a game where if I'm Tommy Reese, I'm saying I'm gonna play Michael Mayer in about 7 different alignments in this game. And I'm gonna move them. And we're going to have all types of things. We're going to force them to be so afraid of Michael Mayer that they make the stupid mistake of leaving Braden Lindsey in a one-on-one on a post route, right?
Right.
That kind of thing. So it's going to have to be creative. And if you can do that and move the pocket a little bit and not just have Jack Cohn always sitting right there, I think this is going to be a big passing game for Notre Dame. I think they can light the scoreboard up throwing the football.
Absolutely.
If there's some creativity, some quick game is cool. RPOs have to be a big part of it, which is surprising because a team that runs as many RPOs as North Carolina does, you'd think their defense would be prepared to handle it, but they're not. They do not defend RPOs very well. So it's kind of those games where I'm chomping at the bit as an offensive coordinator to say, man, if I can have some fun in this one, with the way
because they're not disciplined. I mean, that's really the biggest issue is they're not disciplined. So you can be creative and you can do some fun things in the pass game, and you can kind of, light the fire of creativity with the guys too. You can be like, hey guys, look, man, we're going to have some fun this game. Like, let's do some of this and let's do some of that. And you still want to be true to who you are, but there's different things that you can do to kind of, keep things exciting. I think it'd be fun. And I think that if Tommy Rees has the ability to do it, I think you're right. I think this is an opportunity for him to be very creative and to have a great game plan and a chance, another chance for Jack Cohn to cement himself as who he is with this team.
Yes.
Because I think that's important. Because look, last game was good. He did kind of what I thought he was going to do, even though he had some mistakes. I mean, he was still over 70%. The passing yardage numbers weren't, help sexy, but that's okay because his completions were good and he did what he needed to do.
Should have happened that would have helped that.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think if he can do it a couple of games in a row, then I think the conversation, the narrative starts to switch a little bit. And I think
not
that's
just
important.
the external narrative, but internally.
Yeah.
It creates even more buy-in from the players.
Yes.
I think another part of this pass game that I'm excited to see, Vince, is I'm really curious to see how Tommy Rees gets the running backs involved in the pass game. I think getting North Carolina in space as much as you can against non-corners is the way to go.
Yeah,
that's where I want to be in this game. I want to have as many matchups as I can against their safeties and linebackers. I am not making this are my outside receivers better than Tony Grimes and Kyler McMichael. Again, that doesn't mean that you don't take some shots against them. This isn't Patrick Surtain. You know what I mean?
Right.
It just means don't have your entire game plan built around beating those guys. So RPOs, move in the pocket, ISO stuff with your tight ends and your backs, then that opens up some of those outside opportunities. And then when you get a cover one, then you on 1st and 10 or 2nd and 2 or whatever, I'd prefer to see them on 2nd and shorts like they did last week. If you get into those situations, take your shot.
Right.
Take your shot. Be aggressive, but just make sure you're staying on schedule.
I'm getting a little bit more confident that Notre Dame can pick up a 3rd and short with the run game. But you've also shown that you're not afraid to throw the ball on 3rd and short.
And so Tommy Rees's third down pass concepts have been money for 2 years.
Yeah. I agree.
The reason that they haven't been good on 3rd down this year is because they've had so many 3rd and longs. There's only so many things you can dial up on 3rd and long, especially when you have an offensive line that can't protect anybody more than a second and a half, 2 seconds.
Right. And I thought it was interesting where Brian Kelly actually said in the press conference, we needed to get away from run it on 1st down, run it on 2nd down, throw it on 3rd down.
Except they went right back to that in the 3rd quarter.
Right. UNC. I know. But it's like, why would you think that would work consistently? You know what I mean? Like when – again, it's like beating your head against the wall over and over again. You think, this isn't going to hurt this time. Like, it's just,
So to me, Vince, those are things I see. Screen game, I think, can be real important because here's the thing: a team that's going to stunt and blitz as much as North Carolina does can be real susceptible to screens and not just running outside breaking screens like we saw Saturday. But I'd like to see a couple of you. If you feel like here's what goes into scouting. I'm gonna give a little inside baseball to people. And we've got a little bit, kind of deep in today, but this one's going to be another one talking about horizontal stretches and vertical stretch, all that. Here's another one. So when you're breaking down an opponent, you start to get a read on, okay, I have a good feeling on 2nd and 2 or, on 2nd and short or between, when we're backed up or when we're at this yard line or in this situation, they have a really heavy tendency to bring pressure and bring this kind of pressure. Part of breaking down your opponent is finding those tendencies and then exploiting those tendencies.
Mm-hmm.
There are times that North Carolina will get a little predictable with a field pressure. Okay, field pressure meaning it's coming from the strong side. There are times when they'll bring boundary pressures, but there are times when you can say, okay, I feel like I know in this situation the pressure is going to come. If Tommy Rees can figure that out and bring sort of an inside screen behind that, like an old school tunnel screen, something like that, if he can catch them in that, it's going to go. It's going to go. I think there's a screen or two in this game to be had for huge plays, and not just running back screens. I think I would love to see it with like a Chris Tyree. If he's back this game, I would love to see them. Yeah, Braden Lindsey, Styles, or Chris Tyree. Yep. I would love to see those guys kind of get a couple screens this game, because if you can get those guys in space behind the blitz, because last week the screens were effective because USC was playing so passive. Right. You could kind of get the ball and then kind of get guys downfield to block. This week it's going to be the opposite. It's if you can catch them in one of those pressures, and that's you're talking about protecting the offensive line. Hey, let me beat you on a couple tunnel screens and a swing screen when you bring pressure because you think you can exploit our offensive line, and let's see how apt you are to bring pressure. Oh, so you still want to bring pressure, but you're just going to come up and play aggressively outside? Okay, cool. I'm going to do a quick pump fake, and then I'm throwing a wide fade to Braden Lindsey or Michael Mayer or Kevin Austin, right? That doesn't require me to block for 5 seconds. So you have some counters, but that's where that creativity from Tommy Rees needs to come into play. And I'm hoping that the last couple games have given him enough confidence in the offensive line to say, hey, look, they're not world beaters, but they are at least giving me the opportunity to do a little bit more. And so I'm going to have some fun this week. Yeah. And if he does that, this could be a game where the offensive, the pass game really takes off. Advantage to me in this one, Vince, is advantage Notre Dame.
And it's if Notre Dame is creative, like you say, it's a huge advantage. If they just go out and do their thing like they did on Saturday, it's a slight advantage. That's kind of how I feel about it. I still think Notre Dame can be successful if they just, replicate and build on what they did on Saturday. And the key is build on. But if they can go out and do what you're talking about and be creative and kind of attack them in a different way, but still be up tempo and do those things, I think this advantage gets even bigger. So that's right. It's an advantage Notre Dame either way, but I think that advantage there's a sliding scale there of advantage for Notre Dame based on what they do.
Yeah.